Bills hosting the Jaguars on Monday Night Football. Vic, I got to be honest, I was digging back, and it didn't have to recall that much. These two teams have played a lot of really weird games in like the last decade or so. What has it been with Jacksonville that has given the Bills so much trouble? Maybe not as much in the past, but certainly recently.
Yeah, John, I'm a big believer in the matchup thing, that some teams just match up better against other teams. And when I look at it, it isn't always just a case of, okay, this team's more talented than that team. It's just how particular players, especially at the line of scrimmage, face off against others. And I think in the case of Jacksonville, yeah, they've had the Bills' number and some quirky things have happened along the way. But think about it. These games have generally been competitive, right? So you're in it the whole way, and it leaves room for the quirky thing to happen.
And one of the things you mentioned, the line of scrimmage, that seems to be the place that these games have been won and lost, especially recently with Josh Allen going up against Jacksonville. He pointed it out this week when discussing the challenge that lies ahead. Do you look at maybe the Bills' offensive line versus Jacksonville's defensive front as maybe the real key, especially between those two sides of the ball squaring off?
I think it's a huge key in terms of how this Bills O-line performs against that Jacksonville defensive front. In my estimation, this will be the toughest challenge of the three the Bills have had in terms of that line's holding up in pass protection and also opening holes against the run. This is a really good defensive front. It's well coached, and I think they're going to bring pressure. I think Josh Allen, we know, ran a lot in that first game against Arizona and had success doing so. Now that he's dealing with that broken left hand or the injured left hand, we don't know that it's a break, I got that, but that gloved left hand, you begin to question or wonder whether his willingness to run and Joe Brady's willingness to have him run by design is going to be all that great.
We discussed the Bills' offense because even though the point totals are up at the normal level we're seeing, the yardage numbers certainly are, and the way they're getting there is so different. Do the Bills have to play more, let's air it out and let's let Josh Allen do his thing, or continue to ride the let's really lean into the running game against Jacksonville?
Well, I think the run game is going to be essential to all the success, whatever that is, for the Bills this season. I think everything offensively is going to start from there, and then the passing game needs to grow from there. We have not seen much growth at all from the passing game relative to building off the run. I think this is a game, though, where Buffalo will have to get more production from its receivers. I don't think Trevor Lawrence, the Jaguars quarterback, is going to go this long without getting a hot hand. He's more than capable of doing that, hasn't shown it so far. But in terms of the Bills' offense, this receiver group still finding its way, still trying to build some chemistry, especially with Allen. And I think this is the thing that we need to see, where we need to see some progress. I think the over-aggressiveness of Jacksonville's pass rush, especially on the edges, could potentially create situations where Josh Allen on those shorter and intermediate throws can have success in space with his receivers, and of course those can include his running backs.
Short, intermediate throws, running the football. Vic, I don't have to tell you, one of the biggest talking points around the entire NFL this entire week is the two safety high look and the way the league can combat that and all of that. Where do you stand? And maybe are the Bills at the forefront of, hey, we're not going to wait and we're not going to try to force the hand going deep, and maybe their philosophical shift here that we've seen early is maybe truly the best course of action against the way defenses are playing high-powered offenses across the league?
It's an interesting conversation, especially as it involves the Bills, because defensively that has been their approach, and there has been a lot of criticism about that when they've gone against the explosive teams like the Chiefs, trying to play that big net in the back end and allow a lot of things to happen in front of them. But now it seems to be the way of the league, the design of almost every defense, and you're seeing quarterbacks struggle to have a lot of success against that. But the success they're having comes from taking what they give you, right? Taking those underneath routes, those shorter slant patterns, whatever a quarterback can get, and also movement to get those. And we know Josh Allen on the run can be very effective running and throwing as well as just running. But I do think that the run game and the stats that show it on the rise is no coincidence, because offensive coaches, offensive coordinators are looking for the antidote to defenses that are trying to minimize or eliminate the big play. The question, though, is this. When you are a run-heavy team, when you are relying to go the distance with the run, you run a lot of risk that you're going to get those holding penalties, those things that are going to set you back. The odds just suggest that the more times you are running and asking your line to run block, the better the chances for something like that to trip up a drive.
100%. The numbers talk that way. You mentioned Trevor Lawrence. To me, he was a can't-miss prospect who hasn't delivered on that widely regarded assessment. What sort of a challenge, though, do you feel he presents this Bills defense?
I can't believe Trevor Lawrence is going to go 3 straight games looking like a guy who just is mediocre or worse than that. And I'm not just dealing with the price tag of whatever it is, $258 million contract that he received, putting him right at or near the top of quarterback payroll. But I do see a guy who is misfiring, maybe has a little bit of I don't know if it's a confidence issue, certainly a judgment issue when it comes to figuring out where his receivers are, maybe a chemistry issue. He's got Gabe Davis, for instance, a new guy in that group. It hurt him last week severely to not have Evan Ingram, who suffers that hamstring injury just before kickoff in pregame warmups against the Browns. And not having that kind of target is a problem. But he does have the presence of a solid run game, and I think when you look at Travis Etienne and others, including Lawrence himself, the way he can run, I think those are the kinds of things that can help build him toward the ability to make some plays with his arm. It's a strong arm. It can be very accurate on deep balls, and this, to me, will be the biggest test yet for that remade Buffalo secondary.
We already know Terrell Bernard and Taron Johnson will not play on Monday night. We've seen how they've been able to handle not having Johnson on the field. Now we're going to get our first taste of how Balin Spector handles his second career start filling in for Bernard. Vic, how key and critical is Balin Spector's play, and what did you even see from him in relief against the Miami Dolphins?
I liked the way he played in relief of Bernard. There wasn't as big a drop-off as expected. There was some, but athletically, he made up for some of the mistakes he could make and would make as a guy who just doesn't see a lot of playing time. Athletically, again, he can move around, and I think he could be effective in staying with coverage, but you don't want to get him in too many of those situations where he's out on the island in coverage. You know the Jaguars are going to be looking to do that. Same thing with Dorian Williams replacing Matt Milano, trying to test him on those intermediate throws. But beyond that, I do think that his run support or run effort, filling those gaps, is going to be critical. And again, same with Williams, because this Jaguars team, we just talked about how the Bills would attack the deep zone type style of defense. They're going to be doing the same thing against Buffalo.
Let's wrap on this. Reportedly, Bills bringing in 2 kickers for workouts this week. We've had the Tyler Bass conversation. Them looking actively at potential other options. What do you think that says about their current standing and confidence in Bass moving forward?
It says they've got questions about Tyler Bass. There is no question about that, and they should have those questions. They've been lingering with the way, the inconsistency he has shown, and you can't be left sort of without a net or a backup plan if things just go off the rails for him. And they might be headed there, just in terms of, again, that miss against Miami was easy to overlook in a game that the Bills were otherwise dominating. So let's see where it goes from here. But it's a long season, but they know and we know that so many of these games are going to be close, not going to be like that Miami game, and they're going to need every possible point or kick. You've seen already games literally won by a kicker when the offense of that team hasn't scored a touchdown. And
as history has suggested between these two, it very well could come down to a kick again on Monday night. Vic and I will continue this conversation on a special Sports Talk Live at 6:30 on Monday, leading into the 7:30 kickoff on Monday Night Football, Bills against the Jags.